All right, guys, we are back in my garage for another video, and today we're going to be replacing the brake pads on my 2020 BMW X7. The good news is this process is pretty much the same for a bunch of other BMWs, so X5, 7 Series, 5 Series, basically a lot of different cars have the same style brakes in the rear, and I know one of the main things a lot of people talk about is how to service the rear parking brake and how to get that to retract. So this video will show you a couple different ways to do that, as well as the OEM method that I use, and I will have the tool that I use linked in the video description in case you guys want to use the same thing I got from Amazon. But let's go ahead and hop over to the car. I'll show you guys how it's done, and hopefully you guys find this video useful. Now, as always, for everybody that's new to the channel, I create these videos to help keep you updated on the latest developments in our community, as well as discuss technical topics so that we have a better understanding of how our engines work. So if you're interested in more videos like that, be sure to subscribe because there will be a lot more coming out in the future. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started, and there are a couple things you need to do in order to make sure this all goes smoothly. The first thing is just making sure you don't do anything to the brakes while this job is happening. What BMW recommends is popping the hood because the emergency brake could actuate by mistake, especially if you're somebody that usually puts on the parking brake when you park. Don't do that, obviously, for this job. And if you pop the hood, that will prevent it from turning on by mistake. I don't know if there are any safety systems or anything that could cause it to actuate when you're not intending to. Popping the hood puts it in the service mode just to make sure that won't happen. Then we need to jack up the rear of the car. So the first thing you do is, if your car has air suspension, disable the auto leveling system. So what you need to do is go into the car, and where you have that ride height selection, you're going to push on the button and hold it for 7 seconds and then release. And then you'll see the light go away, and that tells you that the auto leveling is disabled. Then we're going to jack up the rear of the car. I went ahead and chalked the front wheels just to make sure it doesn't roll forward. And then in order to jack up the rear, you're going to jack up from the rear differential. Just make sure your jack isn't on the cover so that you don't damage it, and jack it up as high as you can. This is actually as high as I'm able to jack it up. So the wheels are barely like half an inch or maybe an inch off of the ground. So maybe I need a better jack for this car, but it already sits really high. So just jack it up as much as you can. All you really need to do is get the wheel off. So this should be plenty. And then of course, put your jack stands under the rear to keep it in place. And then of course, it's time to go ahead and remove the rear wheels. If you don't have an impact wrench, make sure you break them loose while the car is still on the ground. They're 17mm bolts, so grab a breaker bar to loosen them. Otherwise, an impact can of course just zip them right off. Then pull off the wheel. Keep in mind, the wheels are really big and heavy. I was pretty surprised when I took these off the first time, so just be ready for it. The rear brake pad wear sensor is only on the right side of the vehicle, and the wire is right on the brake pad, so I recommend removing the pads before removing the sensor. The wire is clipped into 4 brackets, but I started with the 2 that are closest to the pads. It is really hard to remove them on my car, so in some cases what I did is loop a zip tie around the wire and then pull on the zip tie to get it free. The caliper screws are 1/2-inch screws, and you may be able to just loosen them, but there is a counter hold that will usually just spin if you don't hold it. I used an 11/16 box wrench on the counter hold to keep it in place, and then the 1/2-inch screw should back out pretty easily. Do the same on the bottom as well, and here you can see the Loctite on the screw. So of course that's used to keep it in place and prevent the brakes from falling off, but that's also a part of why it can be hard to remove without the counter hold. Now you can finally remove the caliper. It just slides off axially. Don't let it hang by the brake line because it can get damaged under the weight of the caliper. And on our cars, thankfully, it's pretty easy to hook the caliper on top of the knuckle, and it just kind of stays in place up there. So that's what I did. The brake pads should be able to slide out pretty easily at this point. For the outside pad, just lean out one of the ears, and then you should be able to kind of wiggle it out of the way. Otherwise, if you try to pull it out straight, it gets stuck on that decorative clip on the caliper. And here you can see just how low the pad was, so definitely time to replace it. The inside pad should come out much easier since there's more room, so just slide it out towards the inside of the wheel well. And also keep in mind, only the inside pad has a wear sensor, so go ahead and pull that off as well. Next, I removed the brake pad wear sensor from the remaining 2 brackets that were holding it in place. Again, they are both pretty tight, so just take your time pulling the wire out. And then the wire is plugged into the body harness in this box. So lift the two tabs that open the door and then pull out the plug, squeeze on the tab, and then you should be able to unclip the wear sensor and feed it out of the wheel well. The new brake pads are thicker than the old ones, so you need to retract the parking brake to create enough space for the caliper to slide back on, and there are 3 different ways to do that. The first is you can remove the parking brake motor. It is held on with 2 screws, as you see here, and then there is an Allen key on the caliper that you can turn to retract the caliper piston. The second way is to use a tool like Bimmerlink. You can go into the parking brake service option and then select it to put it into service mode. When I clicked the button, I could hear the piston retracting for a few seconds, so I knew it was working, but for some reason it said that the service mode could not be activated. I'm not sure why I got that message, but I can confirm it worked. After either of those steps, you're going to go back to the caliper and use a C-clamp to push the piston back into the caliper. It's really hard to get it all lined up securely, especially with how the parking brake is mounted onto the back of the caliper, but it does work. Now, my preferred way is the OEM method using an OEM style tool. I'll have my tool linked in the video description. I got it from Amazon and it comes with a bunch of adapters that work with other platforms like Volkswagen, Audi, etc. I've used this tool on other Volkswagens and Audis that I've serviced in the past, so I highly recommend using it if you plan on doing brake jobs on any of your other cars, particularly other German cars. On our brakes, you're going to use the number 10 adapter that you can see with kind of 3 pins. Assemble the tool, and then you're going to put the adapter on the caliper piston. Make sure the pins line up with the holes in the piston so that it locks in place. Then tighten the counterhold flange so it holds it up against the caliper, and then you're just going to kind of turn and crank the tool. But you're going to notice as it turns, it doesn't just push the piston in, it actually turns the piston as well, and this is mechanically retracting the piston back into the caliper housing. It'll stop when it's completely bottomed out and flush, so at that point, just back it off slightly, then loosen the tool and remove it from the caliper. Next, we're going to remove these metal guides that the brake pads slide on. They'll be stuck in there pretty good, but they should just pull straight out. The new pads should come with new ones, so you can see these new nice and shiny ones are what we're going to replace it with. Put them into the same slots and push them down to snap them into place. Just a side note, but this is a good time to measure the brake rotor thickness as well. The minimum thickness is 22.4 millimeters. It'll actually say the minimum thickness right on the face of the rotor, so it's easy to remember. However, in my case, I couldn't even get a good reading because the lip of the rotor was so thick that I couldn't get my caliper to fit on it properly. So yes, these rotors will be getting replaced next. Just keep an eye out for that DIY. And as always, the installation is just reverse of removal. As you can see on the brake pads, the new ones are much thicker, and you can actually see what the brake pad wear sensor looks like when it's worn down. So it has a little piece that's sticking out, and when that wears flat, that's what trips the brake wear light on the dash. And you can actually see when it's lined up with the brake pad that the tip of the wear sensor that sticks out pretty much lines up flush with where the flat part of the brake pad is. So where you see that radius, once it starts getting close to the flat area, if you replace it before then you won't trip the wear sensor, and you could theoretically remove and reuse the wear sensor on your next set of brake pads. So just keep that in mind. When installing the new brake pads, you should make sure that you lubricate them with brake pad paste on the backing plate, as well as the 2 ears that go into the metal guides. I have an irrational fear that the paste will somehow get on the mating surface between the pad and the rotor, so I only use a small amount and try to spread it out evenly, but just keep in mind that this does help prevent the brakes from squealing. If you do hear squealing, then it's a good idea just to get it back in there and apply more grease to the moving parts. Go ahead and slide the brake pads back into the caliper carrier, and then grab the new brake pad wear sensor and slide that through the caliper opening and clip it back onto the new brake pad. Then you can slide the caliper back. Then you can slide the caliper back. Then you can slide the caliper back onto the brake pads. The new pads should also come with new caliper screws. Make sure the Loctite is on there so it'll stay on, and then tighten the screws to exactly 35 Newton meters as I perfectly demonstrate here. Beep, 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 beep. Beep, 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 beep. Then just make sure that the caliper still slides in and out, and button up everything else, including the brake pad wear sensor. Plug it back into the body harness and then clip the loose wire back into the retaining bracket so it stays in place. Then mount the wheels back on and lower the car back onto the ground. For the final steps, close the hood and it's time to reset the brakes. Activate the parking brake by pulling on the lever and then press the brake pedal several times so it feels firm. Switch the ignition on and then turn the parking brake off, then on, then back off again to make sure it's operating normally. It's also a good time to check and make sure that your brake fluid level is where it should be at the maximum mark. Then to reset the brake light, go into diagnostic mode by pressing the start stop button 3 times quickly. Make sure the parking brake is off and then press and hold the BC button for 10 to 15 seconds until the service menu comes up. Tap the BC button to switch through the menu until you get to the brake pad service interval, and then long press BC to reset. It should take another 10 to 15 seconds, so just be patient. And then again, you're going to have to long press to confirm you want to reset it. After it's reset, it'll change the interval and it should show green when the reset was successful. Then the last thing you need to do is bed in your brake pads. My recommendation is to find an open parking lot or a clear stretch of road, accelerate up to 35 to 40 miles an hour, and then slow down to 5 miles an hour as fast as you can without engaging the ABS. It should be close to a panic stop, so you really need to get deep into the brakes so they're fully depressed, but not so much that you're actually screeching the car to a stop. Do it 5 or 10 times, and then after you're done, cruise around a little bit to let the brake pads cool off. After a few stops, you should start seeing some of the surface coating coming off, but once they're really bedded properly, it should have a much shinier finish like you see here. So that's how it goes. Again, the parking brake tool is in the video description in case you guys need that. And this process is pretty straightforward, but as you saw, I realized that my rotors needed to be replaced as well. So that DIY will be coming up soon, so stick around for that. And of course, more DIYs will be coming up for the car as I continue with my maintenance on it. So I think this one was pretty straightforward and simple. I'm glad it worked out the first time, and just kind of stay tuned for more. If there's anything else you guys want to see, definitely let me know and I will add it to the list. So for now, I think that's it for this video. Thank you guys for watching and I hope this helps. And if you do have any other questions or comments, leave them down below.